Look, so I know I said I was going to come back with Super Mario Sunshine, but I've been running into some problems recording footage off a Dolphin emulator. For some reason the game's frame rate was so inconsistent. Sometimes the game ran completely fine, but other times the game looked like a third grade science fair for presentation. I just assumed that it was because I was recording, but when I tried playing the game when I wasn't recording, the game still ran like ass. I don't know if this was just my computer, because when I tried playing Sonic Heroes on Dolphin, it ran completely fine, so I don't know what's going on with this game. So it looks like I'm gonna have to drop the Mario Sunshine review until I can get Dolphin to work with this game. But hey, I haven't talked about a mainline Crash Bandicoot game since Crash 4 last year, so this is kind of a win-win in a way. So anyway, let's get the introduction out the way. So by 1999, Crash Bandicoot was pretty much on top of the world. Magazines, commercial, he was pretty much everywhere.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Pack up your stuff. I got a little surprise for you here.
Check it out. What do you think about that?
And along with Spyro, these two would make the PlayStation the console to have at the time. Crash would also be considered one of the main platforming mascots along with Mario and Sonic. So I think most of you Crash fans already know the story by now, but just for the two of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Naughty Dog only had the right to make 3 games, and Crash Team Racing was originally going to be the 3rd game on this series until Naughty Dog decided to make the true 3rd game, Crash Bandicoot Warped. So when Naughty Dog lost the rights to make Crash Bandicoot, they moved on to Jak and Daxter. Now Reactor Cortex wasn't originally supposed to be the 4th game in the series, it was actually named Crash Bandicoot Worlds, where you can control Crash in a free roaming area with puzzle elements and Crash traveling into different worlds. However, Universal Interactive taking the Traveler's Tale to develop the next game, so they scrapped the free roaming idea entirely, and they had to make an entirely new game from scratch, and they only had 12 months just to make the game. I think that this game might be the first Crash game that had people really excited for it, because not only was it Crash's jumps into the 6th generation of consoles, but it was also the first time Crash was going multi-platform. Yeah, Universal struck a deal with Konami and all the companies to get the game to release on the GameCube and the original Xbox. So if you were to go online and to watch a review of Crash Reactor Cortex, you would see that a lot of people would say stuff like, there's way too many vehicles in this game, or I wish there was more platforming here. Where I stand on this, I personally haven't played this game until this review. I actually haven't played any of the Crash games since post PS1 or before the remakes. I've only ever seen reviews of the game, so this is all uncharted territory for me. And in case you guys are curious, I'm actually playing the PS2 version of this game on PSX2. So we start a new save file, and we start this game story off with an almost 10-minute opening. I'll just say it right here. This opening is just 5 minutes of the Crash 3 villains bitching and moaning about how they can't beat Crash, and the other 5 minutes spent with Aku Aku rambling about Uka Uka. I'll just sum it up like this. This game's story takes place after the events of Crash 3, well, whether this game's still canon or not, which I guess you can consider that as not canon, since it's about time it kind of retcons everything past the original trilogy. I'll leave that up to you. Cortex decides that he's sick of Crash ruining his plans, and that not only wants to conquer the world, but he actually says that he wants Crash is dead. That's kinda dark by this series standards, to be honest. Anyway, Uka Uka gets help from the Elementals to help him out with this plan. The Elementals are basically responsible for all the disasters that's been going wrong for the past couple of centuries. Although when Aku Aku finds out about this, he sounds more like he forgot his wallet at a convenience store than actually scared.
No, not the Elementals. Uka Uka, why did you release them? Don't you know what happened the last time they were free?
So then Crash, Coco, and Aku Aku go to the new time twister that Coco builds to stop Cortex. Another thing to mention is that Cortex built a new Bandicoot named Crunch, who was basically what Crash was gonna be if the experiment actually worked, and I kinda like that concept. You're basically going up against the Bandicoot that you're supposed to be, and that's pretty much it. From here on out, it's just get all the crystals and beat Cortex, the same old stuff that we're used to from the older games. There's not a lot of cutscenes to talk about here. The only other cutscenes that will happen is Crunch whining to Cortex about how he wants to fight Crash on his own without the Elementals' help. There's also the Elementals taunting you when you're about to enter a level. You know, one of my favorite parts about Crash 3 is whenever you're about to start a level, and the bosses from that world start talking shit about you, so make you want to beat their asses even more. But here...
You want a piece of me, Bandicoot? Huh? Huh? Do ya? Huh? Wuss.
Wow, was that really all you had to say here? They actually have some pretty recognizable actors to play these guys, like Thomas F. Wilson, Mark Hamill, Crash's voice actor in Titans and the remakes, Jess Harnell, and Arlie Ermey.
It looks to me like the best part of you ran down to cracking your mama's ass and ended up as a brown stain on the mattress.
While not only didn't have any involvement with this game, it's cool having Clancy Brown back as Cortex and Uka Uka, and it's also one of the last games that has Mel Winkler as the voice of Aku Aku, who unfortunately passed away in mid-2020. It's also the first game where Debbie Derryberry, aka Jimmy Neutron, voices Coco, and she does a pretty good job here. Overall, everyone does a pretty good voice performance. Alright, so let's get on to the gameplay now. So it's important to know that Wrath of Cortex is pretty different compared to the original trilogy, since there's a lot more vehicles in this game compared to War. I noticed how people like Atticus who did videos on this game, they tried doing it by stage, and I tried to avoid doing that so it doesn't look like I'm copying off of them, but when I tried doing it traditionally, it was kind of hard to get my thoughts all up together, so I really can't think of a better way to tackle this game. So let's just start with the first level, Arctic Antics. So video game law dictates that the first level in the game shouldn't be an ice level, but to be fair, Snowgo was Crash 2's second level, so it's not that bad. And even then, Garcia Gantic is a pretty decent way to start off this game. This level has all the traits that we love about the series, like boxes to break, bonus routes, death routes, even Aku Aku invincibility comes back. Sadly, the jingle when you get through Aku Aku Mass in the older game doesn't play here. And it doesn't enhance your speed either, but it's good to have it back though. But overall, everything here is pretty tightly designed, and it actually fixed ice physics from Crash 2. It's nowhere near as heavy, and you don't slip and slide all over the place either. Although there is one thing I have to say about the game, it's Crash's control. I don't know if it's just the 60 FPS, but Crash feels way slower and floatier. Everything in Wrath of Cortex feels slower in general. The bouncy crates, the exclamation crates, the iron crates appearing. The game just feels really slow in comparison to the original trilogy. It's also kind of disappointing that Crash doesn't do the crash dance anymore whenever he gets a gem. He just does a high jump. But it is kind of cool how you still have control over Crash when he does that, so you can just jump right into the next level. So after a pretty great platformer level, we're thrown right into a vehicle level already, but I guess that's not too bad since Under Pressure was Crash 3's second level, so I guess it's keeping sure with Crash's original formula. This is basically the airplane levels from Crash 3, and I guess they're alright, but they're kind of boring though. You just shoot out on blimps really slowly and the enemies barely ever shoot you. It's just a little bit too easy in my opinion. The only actual problem with this level is that the control. If you just tap the analog stick just a little bit, Crash starts turning away like it just got caught by the cops selling crack. I know the turning just looks stiff from your perspective, but this is literally just me tapping the analog stick left and right, like just so I don't accidentally fling myself all the way to Florida. At this point, it feels like there's a little bit too much different gameplay style since it's more vehicles and platforming. In all the reviews I've seen of this game, people tend to agree that the best vehicle in this game is the ball rolling levels, and for me, I don't know if it's just because I'm just bad at the game, but I feel like the controls could have been a little bit better. I mean, I guess though I like the idea of it just being Super Bandicoot ball, but I think there could have been more railings in this level because I followed this stage way more than I should have, and I don't really like the momentum you build up whenever you're going down a slope. But it's a nice detail to add with you going down a slope, you build more speed, and when you're going up a slope, you eventually slow down. It just makes it really hard for me to slow down whenever I'm going down a slope. And I don't know if this was just me, but I swear whenever I'm pressing up on the analog stick when I'm near an edge, Crash just straight up just does nothing. Like, I didn't do that on purpose. I was literally holding up the entire time and Crash didn't do anything. I mean, getting all the boxes in this level was pretty fun, I guess, but thankfully the next level is a platforming stage. Wizards and Lizards are one of my favorite levels in this game because it has a death route, which is actually pretty challenging than the one before, and actually managed to get me a couple of times. This is also the first level that has a chase sequence like the older games, and it's pretty cool. It has all the standard stuff you would expect from a chase segment, like boxes to break, pits to jump over, and it's all great stuff. Although this is a level where I found out that when a music track ends in this game, it just restarts from the beginning instead of just looping it. Overall, good level. Combat the Reactor starts like it's going to be another vehicle section, but thankfully it only lasts for about like 30 seconds before we get into the actual platforming. And it's all pretty good stuff, but this is also where some of the problems of enemy placement in this game come in. They never really try to get in your way intentionally. The only way to die from these guys is just to stand exactly where they're standing or just being a complete idiot. Sometimes you can just completely avoid them. They're not obstacles getting in your way, they're basically just employees doing their factory jobs. But other than that, it's a pretty decent level with great level design. Moving on, we get to our first boss fight, and it's not good. Take the ball rolling from level 3 and make the entire level way too spacious. You and Crunch are in the ball and little stones come out. You have to make the stones blue so they can hit Crunch, but if the Crunch gets to them first, you either have to wait until they go back to normal or sacrifice your health just to get them back to normal so you can make them blue again. What's really annoying about this boss is that the stones are scattered across the area, so when you can get one ball blue, and you try to go all around the globe just to get the other one, by the time you get to it, Crunch would have already gotten your stone. Just a really anticlimactic boss to end out the first warp room. After we beat this boss, we get a power up just like in Crash 3, but instead of a super belly flop, we get the ability to sneak on nitro crates. Probably the most useless power-up in the entire series, and it only gets used once or twice in the game. It was so useless that it took well reworked as Kapuna Wall in Crash 4. But now we're going into the second warp room now. So we get the level 6, Jungle Rumble. This does it pretty well with more Crash platforming. There's even a fun bonus level, but then we get to the final section. And to be fair, it's not that bad since it's just a chase level and it's only at the end of the level, but we're kind of going a little bit overboard with the vehicles. Is it too much to ask for an entire level of just normal platforming in a platformer? This is also why I remember the one nightmare that every Crash fan has, just missing just one box. Okay, might look like everything is pretty solid, and honestly, the game's been more hit than miss so far. But then we get to... So we get to our first water stage, and alright, to be fair, I didn't even let the water levels in Crash 3 that much, but this game just takes it to a whole new level. It starts off exactly like it was in Crash 3, but then we get into the submarine, which is just... Unlike being in a war for getting through a level without getting hit or dying, it just makes you an even bigger target. You're slower, turning's a huge chore, and it's way more dangerous inside the submarine than outside it, because they're only on defense and shooting out missiles from the window and dropping bombs. But that's not going to save you from the terrible controls or bad enemy placement, which just hides enemies in behind the foreground, because that's fair. If you're wanting to make a sharp turn when you're about to collide with the bomb, you better just forget about that and just meet your fate. Next we have Bonsai. This level is pretty interesting because it's the first time we get to play as Coco in a platforming stage in the series. I'm a little bit split about these levels. On one hand, Coco doesn't get all the moves that her brother has. She's basically just Crash 1 Crash, which means no double jump, no slides, no slide jumps, and no death tornado spins. The closer she gets to sliding is just this pathetic leg sweep. I never really use this move. But honestly, Coco probably has one of the best levels in the game because they're entirely platforming. This level is a little bit more traditional Crash, and can make you think about how you're tackling this level without the moveset that you're so accustomed to. I also love how in the loading screens, whenever it's Coco's turn to play a level, she just pushes Crash out the way and probably send him to the wrong place. So level 9 is basically just Tornado Alley, but let's remove the rapid fire bullets and make the only range of attack this slow ass target thing. I wouldn't mind this all too much if the other pilots didn't kamikaze into all the goddamn time. I love it whenever I regain my health only to lose it again when I just got it back up. I really don't have anything else to say about this level, it's just another terrible vehicle to use. Next we have H2O, which it's not like it's going to be another terrible level since it starts with a submarine again. But it gets better when we get into the main platforming. Compared to other levels, this level can be pretty challenging sometimes because of the tighter and precise platforming. I always get really tense whenever I have to do platforming over tiny platforms. I always feel like I'm either going to overshoot the jump or undershoot it. I know that's probably what the developers were probably going for, but I never really had that problem in Crash 2 or 3. But other than that, it's a decent level. Now we get to the second boss in this game, and it's way too easy. I mean, it's better than the last boss, not that that's an accomplishment, but it just feels like an end trophy clone from Crash 3, but just not as aggressive and not as fast paced. But now we're getting into the third world, and we start off strong with a pretty great Crash platforming stage, the Gauntlet. The main level is good fun, but the real highlight here is the Death Roof path, and it's where the level gets its name from. It's pretty difficult too, it managed to kill me a couple of times. I have nothing else to say here, it's a pretty good level. Next we have another great Coco level. It's not only a pretty fun level in general, but also manages to look different from Bonsai. While Bonsai was more slower paced and low key, Tsunami's more faster and high energy. It also ends up with a pretty good chase section by the thing that the level was named after. Also I died here because I thought X was supposed to speed you up, but then I found out X was to jump and circle was to speed up, which I guess makes sense, but it's just kind of confusing. Now we get to this level, which is just a motorcycle level from Crash 3, which not a lot of people liked in the first place. But instead of just stiff turning to deal with, now there's slippery physics. It's way too easy to slide all over the place. And then there's this pit, right, which I fell into like 3 times. And every time you die at any part of the track, you start from the very beginning instead of Aku Aku getting you back on the road. Fuck this level and whoever made it. Eskimo Roll is another ball rolling level, and this one is a little bit harder since there's a lot of holes around the stage layout, and it's pretty easy to fall in there if you're not careful. I didn't fall in them too much, but I wish there was more realism from keeping from falling off the stage. Really, the one thing I didn't like about this level is how bosses from older games were downgraded into just obstacles that don't really do anything to try and stop you. I think with the bigger levels in this game, there would be better enemy placement. Fahrenheit Frenzy starts like the jetpack level from Crash 2, and it somehow feels even weirder to control in this game than it did in Crash 2. It's really hard to get used to the controls, but it's over in about a minute before we get to the main stage. There's not a lot to talk about here except for the fact that there's these invisible crates that make Crash undetectable by lasers, and even a section where you get to run through a X-ray and get to see Crash's skeleton, and that's pretty cool too. Oh, enemies don't get skeleton skins. Okay, that's just lazy. Now on to the third boss, and it's better than the first two bosses, but there's not really a lot to talk about here since all you do is just run away from Crunch, then get to the mech, spray them down, lather, rinse and repeat, and the boss is over. But you get the Death Tornado spin away from this boss fight. I even like how the animation is more bouncier and stretchier than it wasn't warped. Now we get into the fourth world, the domain of Lolo. First up is Avalanche, another great Coco stage. There's a bunch of Nitro crate jumps in the beginning of the level, which are alright, but I swear anytime I try to jump over the Nitros, Coco just stops in midair for some reason. But then we get to the snowboard section of the level where we just run away from the avalanche, and it's pretty cool. You gotta go through all these flagship points, and I don't think anything happens if you don't, but it's still fun stuff. Jordy Boy starts off pretty good, and he brings out the monkey bars from Crash 2 and 3. Oh wait. Oh, what the hell is this? Why does Crash move so goddamn slow on the monkey bars? This is literally how fast he can go. It takes an entire minute to get to the actual stage, and if you die, you have to start the entire section again. Look how fast he does this in Crash 3. Why would they bother bringing back stuff from the older games when it feels like they just went out of their way to make it even worse than it already was? But to be fair, that's only in the first part of the level, and everything else is smooth sailing. At the halfway point, we get into the mech, which is a pretty obvious alien reference, and WHAT THE FUCK?! Alright, so for some reason, this is where PCXX2 decided to go on an acid trip, so now I can't see shit. And it's not that the mech was any good in the first place. It's slow, it's sluggish, shooting out one before was a crapshoot, and jumping over bottomless pits is easier said than done. But that being said, now I can barely see anything, which just makes it already bad section even worse. I died at least 15 times in the level just because I couldn't see where I was about to go or where I was about to land. Just, thank God it's all over. Crash Race is probably one of the worst levels in this game. There's 3 ships you have to shoot down, and thankfully you have rapid fire bullets again. But you have to shoot these things down because they're shields, and nothing about the game tells you about it. And it took me about like, what, 3 to 4 minutes to finally figure it out. And I was pretty close to dying too, so A+ game design, guys. Weather Rides is another great Crash stage, with these fans to cross by, and later having to cross the same fans, but with Nitro Crate to account for. There's even a pretty good bonus route in this though, so we're back on the great stuff again. Now we fight Lolo, which is pretty much a 1-to-1 recreation of the end trophy boss fight from Crash 3. But out of all the bosses in this game, this was the only one that actually came close to killing me. I don't have any footage because I found out that I was recording the PCXX2 in window and not the game itself. But I was at 8% health when I finished this boss, so for engine clone, this is a pretty good boss. And now with that done, we're now in the final world, so let's get started with Crash and Burn. After a pretty good jump at the start of the level, Crash and Burn is about as normal as a Crash level as you can get. A bunch of platforms and enemies to dodge, and the volcanic setting is a pretty nice change of pace since it's something that we don't normally see in Crash games. Gold Rush is another great platforming stage. It's nice to see a little bit more consistency now. I know I gave this game a lot of shit for having too many vehicles, but one thing I can give Reactor Cortex props is that every level looks and feels the same, just by having some levels that having the same level theme. I mean, there is a seesaw thing that Crash has to ride, but it's over in 30 seconds. The only time that was a problem was when I missed one box because they made square to jump and not X, so I had to die just to get it, but then I glitched myself into these monkey bars, so I had to restart the level. So that was pretty bad, but that was the only problem in an otherwise great level. Okay, I do have one little nitpick though. At this point of the level, you get 3 Aku Akus who was all on the monkey bars. Crash already moves slower on the monkey bars, but his speed barely even increases after the 3rd Aku Aku mask. Seriously, why does Crash move so slow when his entire upper body is just a huge face? Here we have the final ball level in the game, and it's probably the best of them all. But this time the older bosses have been integrated even worse. This is just depressing at this point. They're all just terrible excuses for obstacles, and it's just sad seeing all these great characters go to waste. Creative Fireball starts off pretty good with classic Crash platforming, and even makes the monkey bars actually kind of fun. But then we get to the mech again, and thankfully it doesn't feel tacked on here since it's another chase segment, so now you can't rely on double jumps to help you out. But once you get into the final section, oh wow, PCXX2 has a mental breakdown again. The thing is, the platforming was actually pretty good in this section. If it wasn't for the glitch here at the end of the level, this would actually be a pretty good penultimate level for this game. Cortex Ward is the best level in the entire game because it's just pure platforming the whole way through and tests everything that you learned up to this point, like double jumping, death tornado spin, that section at the end of the level where you can use Aqua Waku to cheese your way through some nitro crates, a pretty rough death route out for getting all the colored gems. Even a Fruit Bazooka gets its moment to shine in this level. This is a pretty great final level, and it's pretty challenging and fair at the same time too. I would honestly go as far as saying that this is one of the best levels in the series. Our final boss time, and it's by far the best Cortex boss in Classic Crash. You have to dodge all these things that the elementals throw at you that can either kill you or immobilize you, and it's all a lot harder than it sounds. While I didn't die here as much as I thought I would, it did keep me on my toes, and it actually killed me once. Once Crunch gets worn out for some reason, you pop a bullet in his skull so he can break free from the mind control, so he can smack Cortex upside the head. Do that 4 times and that's it. So it's nice to see this game end off pretty strong. The final cutscene has Uka Uka telling Cortex that since we have to gather all the gems, that they can bring the elementals as many times as they want, which is kind of...
What?
Wow, that is severe tonal whiplash. You have Uga Uga going like, oh Cortex, we're not finished yet, and then they're just dancing. Like, am I missing a joke or... Alright, so like the original trilogy, there's a secret ending locked behind getting all the gems, color gems, and all the relics. That would mean I have to get underwater levels again in this level, so... Yeah, fuck that. And plus, the only thing that changes is the fact that Crunch turns good and Cortex and Uka Uka are stranded on an iceberg, which you left to eventually crash to insanity. Since we went over every level in this game, I think it's time that we talk about how this game looks. The graphics in this game are pretty good. It really looks like you're playing in the world of Crash Bandicoot. All the environments look colorful and I didn't really run into any glitches, and well, except for that one. But I'll blame that on emulation issues rather than the game being completely glitchy. But that's just the levels. The character models are just awful. Everyone looks like they're from a bootleg, and everyone just moves so stiff too. I mean, just look at Cortex. Somehow he looks even less expressive than he did in Warped, even with the PS2 power too. I mean, I guess Crash looks fine. I even thought that was pretty cool how in the Xbox version, he has added fur textures. That's still kind of for the smoother model in the PS2 and GameCube versions, but it's a nice detail though. Coco on the other end just, ugh, what happened to you? I didn't know she could let herself go like that. That's honestly just, ugh. I know this is an early PS2 game, but does it really help the fact that these models somehow look worse than the ones from 1998? Even with that excuse in mind, Jak and Daxter came out in the same year, and yeah, that game's graphics haven't aged the best, but it's way better than the Cortex. At least the soundtrack is pretty good. All the songs in this game really fit the mood of the level, and they're great to listen to. I always like the Gauntlet and Bonsai get the atmosphere of the level down. It never really feels like they're out of place either, although I wouldn't really go out of my way to download any of these songs to listen to them. I mean, it's a good soundtrack, but just look up a playlist on YouTube if you can. I'll be honest, I was really hoping I would like what most people would hate about Reactor Cortex, but it was the complete opposite. The thing about Reactor Cortex is that the game is constantly jumping in quality. One level is going to be good, the next level is going to be mid, and some are just terrible. Then the other one's going to be great again. I guess since the game is constantly changing gameplay styles, I'm never really bored, but it really just feels like Traveler's Tale just looked at Crash 3 and just said, hey, we can do that too, let's just add more vehicles. You're forced into a new gameplay style all the time in this game. To be fair, some of them are pretty decent, like Coco's levels, but others just make my computer go into a cardiac arrest. I hear a lot of people saying that Crash 3 is overrated because there's not a lot of levels focused on Crash platforming, and you know what? Your points are valid, but at least in that game, it eases you into the different gameplay styles and have it ramp up in difficulty as the game goes on, and not just throw a different gameplay style left to right for no reason. Some styles only show up for one level and never show up again, so yeah, now that I finally played this game, I have no reason to go back to it. The original games, and especially Crash Team Racing, are a game that I can pick up and play anytime I want until full completion too, and not get tired of it, but here, I'm ready to rage quit after the second water level. I mean, this game's definitely better than Crash Purple or Crash Boom Bang, but it's definitely not as good as the original games though. I really don't hate the game like some people do, but as of now, this is probably my least favorite classic Crash game. If you want to play this game, then go ahead, but stay away from the original PS2 version, because the loading screens in that version is just atrocious. The version I emulated was the greatest hits label of the PS2 version, which cut down on the loading screens. They're practically non-existent in the GameCube port, but you're probably better off playing it on the original Xbox. But if you want to play the good fourth game in the series, play It's About Time. At least the mechanics don't go right you all full circle and everything. I know there has to be some people who unironically love this game, and that's probably fine, but to me, this game just feels like the poor man's Warped. But that's all for this video, so next video is actually going to be another remake of a video that I made back in 2019, and I'm actually really excited about doing that because, besides Sonic, it's probably one game that I probably put a lot of hours into when I was really young, so that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.